Okay, you're live.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, it's 6 o'clock and you have a live quorum in addition to others.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. Today is Wednesday, November the 18th, 2020, and welcome everyone. Ms. Cole, can we get a roll call?
Yes. Judith Fox?
Here.
Chip Guthrie?
Here.
Bernard?
Bernard.
Bernard? William Feldkamp?
Here.
Judith Just?
Here.
Ozzie Ona?
Here.
Jeffrey Harris?
Here.
Bob Dorenzo?
Here.
Great.
Wonderful. Well, shall the four of us do the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Are there any additions, deletions, or reordering?
No, Mr. Chairman.
In that case, could I have a move for approval of the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second. Moved and seconded by Mr. Guthrie. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
And next, the approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes of the October 14th, 2020 regular meeting.
Okay,
I'll second that.
and seconded by Mr. Harris. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Ms. Cole, can you swear in staff and applicants, please?
Yes. Do we have the applicant, is he present yet or not?
Yes,
Or they are,
we'll just wait for the video and audio.
okay.
Mr. Morrow, could you please turn on your video and audio? Oh, there we go.
Here we are.
Awesome.
Ah,
All right.
good evening,
Wonderful.
Mr. and Mrs. Morrow. Shall we get
So if
started?
everyone who's planning on giving testimony, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. If you do you swear and affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say yes.
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 Thank you.
All right. Okay, there are no withdrawals or postponements. Board disclosures, any board disclosures on these items?
I have none.
Seeing none, shall we go in directly into new business? Mr. Fogel going to do the presentation?
Mr. Fogel will be controlling the slides, but I'll be doing the presentation
Okay.
for you this evening.
Okay, fine. Take it away.
Yeah. What happened? We lost them. Right.
Can you go to the full screen, maybe? Perfect. Okay, so good evening. For the record, this is Jordan Hodges. I'm the Senior Historic Preservation Coordinator for the City of Lake Worth Beach, and I'll be presenting item A for you this evening, and that is a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of a new plus or minus 3,096 square foot single family structure located at 302 North Lakeside Drive. Next slide. So the property owner, Mr. Gustav Moro, is requesting approval for the construction of a new single-family residence. The property is located in the Old Lucerne Local Historic District at the northeast corner of the intersection of North Lakeside Drive and 3rd Avenue North, and has public frontage to the west on North Lakeside Drive and on the Lake Worth Beach Municipal Golf Course to the east. The property has 70 linear feet of frontage along North Lakeside Drive, which includes a vacant 50 by 135 platted lot of record and the north 20 feet of an abandoned 3rd Avenue North between North Lakeside Drive and the municipal golf course. The property is located in the single-family residential zoning district and retains a future land use designation of single-family residential. Next slide. So the earliest information available in the property appraiser's files indicates that this lot has been vacant since 1956. In addition, the Sanborn Fire Insurance Company, this is one of their maps from 1928, shows the lot as vacant. The HRPV has reviewed 2 previous proposals for new construction on this lot. The new single-family residences, or the proposed single-family residences, were approved by the board in 2012 and 2015, but were never constructed. Next slide. This is the parcel as it sits today. As you can see, it's a vacant lot, vacant sodded lot. And you can see through to the golf course. That is a broader shot, and you can see the curb cut for the old 3rd Avenue North. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned in the introduction, the property has 70 feet of linear frontage. You can see that it is a standard 50 by 135 lot, and then the old right-of-way there, which has been abandoned. We have had a few meetings with public services regarding the utilities that run underneath 3rd Avenue North, and the property will require a 20-foot wide easement north of the south property line, which is the width of the old right-of-way, as there is a major sewer trunk line and a stormwater outfall line there. As you can see on the proposed site plan, the applicant is locating a driveway in this area in case the city needs access to those utilities. Other site features that you can see include a rear pool, a raised rear deck, wood fencing and with vertical gardens, paver walkways and driveways, and a hidden carport that parking area leads to. Next slide. The proposed new construction project is consistent with the site data requirements in the city zoning code. And although the base zoning sets the maximum building lot coverage at 30%, LDR section 23.3-7C6 allows for additional lot coverage as the project is a single-story house that does not exceed 15 feet in height and incorporates sustainable features and improvements. The applicant has provided a justification statement that outlines the sustainable features of the project, which was included in board packet attachment D. It is the analysis of staff that the project does qualify for an additional 2.8% in building lot coverage above the 30% allowed by base zoning, and will be required to provide the additional $1,320 in sustainable features as outlined in section 23.2-33D1. Next slide. So a preliminary landscape plan was included as attachment C in the board packet. According to the applicant, the landscaping is beyond the requirements of the code through the utilization of a large number of plant materials, mostly native to the state of Florida, and the incorporation of large specimen quality trees, the construction of vertical gardens on the fences facing North Lakeside Drive, and the implementation of 2 large bamboo groves along the north and south property line. In addition to the landscaping, one qualifying feature is also additional open space, which is required by the code, which they also meet. One other way that they could potentially meet the sustainable bonus threshold is to be qualified as a Florida green building. So we would need to look into that. They have many ways to achieve that. The landscaping will be evaluated at permitting to ensure that the proposal meets or exceeds the city's landscape requirements in accordance with the Sustainable Bonus Initiative. Additional open space is provided beyond the requirements of the code as the project proposes an impermeable surface total of 41.8%, whereas 55% is allowed for a large lot in single-family residential. Additionally, and we hit on that, the total value of qualifying improvements shall be reviewed by staff prior to the issuance of a building permit. Next slide, Abraham. Okay, so recent increases in FEMA's base flood elevation requirements have impacted residential neighborhoods in residential historic districts along Florida's southeast low-lying coastal cities. The required base flood elevation for this property is now at 10 feet, including 12 foot of freeboard required by the city as determined by the city's floodplain administrator based on FEMA maps and requirements. So as you can see on here, the existing lot elevation is 4 feet 9, and now the finished floor elevation is required to be at 10 feet. New construction must comply with the current flood regulation requirements, which will result in structures that are built substantially higher than their historic counterparts. The sustainable bonus to allow the additional lot coverage specifies that the project shall not exceed 15 feet in height. And although here it says 19, the total height of the structure reaches 19, but the measurement in height begins at the finished floor elevation, not at grade. So by that measurement, the structure is only 14 feet in height, which qualifies for the bonus. Next slide, Abraham. Here you can see the streetscape elevation. These are useful in determining compatibility of massing, scale, height. But the single family residence is designed with a volumetric design that attempts to conceal the overall height of the structure and places covered parking where it is least visible from the street. While soil is mounded on the parcel to minimize the visual impacts of the exposed high foundations, fencing and extensive landscaping is also included to minimize the difference in finished floor heights with neighboring properties. It is staff's analysis that the proposal responds adequately to the lot size, shape, and configuration and development pattern within the district. Next slide, please. So the design is contemporary and it kind of uses several different massing elements to arrive at its final plan. But some exterior features include natural coral stone. It has finished stucco on some massing, large expanses of windows, and it's kind of staggered facade. Here you can see the west elevation, which is the front from North Lakeside Drive, and the rear, which would be visible from the golf course. Next slide, Abe. You can see from the north and south elevations, the 4 individual massing elements alternate between stucco and coral stone. And again, the facades are featuring kind of large single windows. This is also where you can best see the carport that is kind of hidden underneath that second massing unit. And here's a close-up of the kind of recessed entryway off of the driveway and some of the materials that are being used: the coral stone, black aluminum windows, and stucco. So this is an interior plan, and we'll just kind of walk through that quickly. You can see the entryway down to the bottom right, which leads into a living room, dining room, kitchen area. And then you get to a stair or a second bedroom there, a stair area that leads up to that floating master bedroom portion, and a stair that leads down to the carport area. And then in the front of the structure, there is a separate staircase that leads up to that front bedroom unit. Next slide. So all new construction within designated historic districts shall be visually compatible. New buildings should take their design cues from surrounding existing structures using traditional or contemporary design standards and elements that relate to the structures around them and the district as a whole. Building design styles, whether contemporary or traditional, should be visually compatible with neighboring structures. And then approving or denying applications for certificates of appropriateness for new construction. The city shall also, at minimum, consider the additional guidelines which help define visual compatibility, which are provided in your staff reports and listed in LDR section 23.5-4K3A. It is the analysis of staff that the new construction project as proposed is generally compatible, but we did kind of have one recommendation, and that is number 4, that the relationship of solids to voids on the front facade of a building shall be visually compatible and in harmony with the structures located in the district. Long unbroken facades in a setting of existing narrow structures can be divided into bays, which will complement visual setting in the streetscape. So although that specifically mentions the front facade, staff did make a recommendation, and you all can discuss that if you'd like, that the north and south facades actually do have some long expanses of blank facades. And to satisfy this, staff did add a condition of approval that additional windows or exterior finishes be installed in those areas. Again, that is just a recommendation, and you all are free to discuss that. Here you have a rendering of the property. As you can see on that kind of front massing where that coral stone sets, that is the finished floor elevation. Everything below that is going to be foundation, which they've tried to mask with the fencing and the vertical gardens. But as proposed, the design is contemporary in style and massing and utilizes natural materials, layered setbacks, and integrated landscaping. New construction in the city's historic districts are not limited to any particular architectural style, but staff does recommend that the design professional design solely within one architectural style. And it is the analysis of staff that the new construction project as proposed is generally compatible with the regulations set forth in the Historic Preservation Ordinance, and that the design of the structure displays architectural features and materials that are consistent with contemporary architecture. Adding contemporary architecture into historic districts can create an architectural record for present styles, which can add to the unique character and chronology of building styles constructed through the city's history. So as proposed, the application is consistent with the city's LDRs as conditioned, and the structures, design, and site plan are generally consistent with the contemporary architecture and the Historic Preservation Ordinance. Therefore, staff is recommending approval with conditions. We can kind of go through those conditions now, or we can.
Let's do them now.
Do them now?
Yeah.
So condition number 1 is a pretty standard condition. The windows and doors shall be wood-clad, aluminum, or fiberglass, subject to staff review at permitting. All proposed exterior entry doors shall be compatible with the contemporary architectural style and shall be subject to staff review at permitting. The windows shall be recessed a minimum of 3 inches as measured from the finished face of the exterior wall to the glass. Windows shall not be installed flush with the exterior wall. The glazing shall be clear, non-reflective, and without tint. Low E glass is allowed, but the glass must have a minimum 70% visible light transmittance as measured from the center of glazing. Glass tints and any other glass treatments shall not be combined with the low E coating to further diminish the VTL or the VLT of the glass. Number 4 is what I was hitting on earlier, that staff recommends that additional windows or exterior finishes such as wood look screening or natural stone be installed on the north and south elevations to avoid long expanses of blank facade. Number 5 is a new condition that we did not include in the staff reports, but prior to the issuance of a building permit, a 20-foot wide easement shall be required to the north of the south property line, and that is for access for utilities and public services. So that concludes my presentation. We did have one submission for public comment, we can read that now, or we can let the applicant talk, or
Yeah.
whatever you prefer.
Let's let the applicant talk now, Mr. and Mrs. Morrow. You have any comments on the presentation? Can you hear us?
Yeah, he's muted.
You were?
He's muted.
Can you hear us now?
Ah, yes, we can. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Good evening, everybody.
Yeah.
Hello.
Would you like to expand on what we've heard?
Yes, I only would like to add a little bit of a historical perspective and on our purchase of this lot. And we bought it with my wife about 5 years ago. And we actually live in Wellington. And our thinking was that with our kids going to college, we thank God they have already gone now. We will be able to build our dream home and move closer to the city, to the ocean. And unfortunately, at the time, we were not able to start our construction process. And I say unfortunately because the base flood elevation was only 7 feet, and we work with the Planning and Preservation Division in designing another project for the lot, which had more of early 20th century South Florida look to it. It was a 2-story house, and that would have been our original preference. By the time we put our finances together and we were ready to actually break ground, we arrived to Mr. Williams Waters' office and his wonderful staff. By the way, they have all been very, very nice and professional to us. We're very thankful for that. And with our original proposal, only to learn on that day that the new FEMA maps were coming on, and that the new base flood elevation was probably going to be increased from 7 feet to 10 feet. That extra 3 feet really rendered our original 2-story dwelling completely unsustainable. I mean, it was already tall to start with, and by the time we added that extra footage, it would have looked a little bit out of place, not only for the neighbors, but for ourselves as well. So very quickly, we assemble our architect and design team. We look at this new problem of the 10-foot elevation, and we came up with this design that we are very happy with because we believe it adjusts to the current conditions of the site. And the trick to be able to build a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, 1-story house in such a small lot was the chance that we had that the garage had not to be elevated to the same level than the ground zero of the house. That allowed us for that floating master bedroom to go on top of it. And thanks to that, we were able to basically come together with a design that was pleasant, useful, and will not become something too big or too tall or too ugly to look at from the street. And we worked hard to come together with a set of materials that we thought will complement well the neighborhood, and like coral stone, which is indigenous to Florida. And we are creating a vertical garden. So the front of the building, that bedroom that protrudes into Lakeside Drive, will feel a little bit like it's floating and not just some tall structure coming out towards the street. And we did the same with the rest of the volumes to secure that they give that sense once you are inside the driveway courtyard to feel a little bit like it's floating. And otherwise it would have felt like a very heavy and tall structure. And we are happy with the results. We kind of hope that the commission also appreciates it in the same way. And
Well,
I'll be
thank
happy
you.
to answer any questions that you may have, okay?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, we have 7 members on the board. Do we have some questions from board members?
Yeah, I have a few questions and comments about this. First of all, there seem to be inconsistencies between the plan and the elevations as far as openings and window placements. And I'm just wondering, maybe you could walk me through a few of those. If you look at the north elevation of the building, there appears to be a large opening where the stair is for that bedroom on the bottom right of that north elevation drawing. And that's not
Yes.
shown. That's not shown in the plan.
That, yeah, let me be sure we are on the same spot.
Yeah,
And,
north elevation, right side of the drawing, that big square opening that's gray.
oh, yes, and we decided in order to help the neighbor to our north, there is a little hallway as you enter that little third bedroom, okay, and from the garage. There is a little entry point that is separated for that wall, and we decided to make that square in the middle of that wall, that void, to help with our neighbors, so it wouldn't have such a big stone wall facing the neighbor. That's why there is an opening there.
Okay,
It's a
so
little
that's-
architectural detail.
So that's actually that actually is in the plan, or that will be included as part of the plan. Because I think that's a nice feature. I mean, I think that's a very nice feature to help break up that wall.
Yes, and also as you are coming into that hallway through those steps, that way you will feel more in contact with the plants and the light and the outdoors, and it's not gonna feel like a dark, enclosed space as you're moving up those steps. And
Right, okay, so then staying on that side of the building, I noticed on the plan, the site plan, there's a walkway that runs out to the street. Does that walkway, is there a gate? Obviously, there's a
Yes.
gate somewhere. Does that show up on the elevations?
There is a gate there, and it shows in the render of the front of the building.
Okay.
We can see it over there. Yeah.
Right, okay, so that's going to be another wood gate, is that correct?
Correct.
And
Yes.
is that, explain to me the function of that gate. Is that serving only that bedroom?
No, that gate will allow. It will almost be like a service entrance to the north side of the house.
Okay.
And so not only can someone access that bedroom, but there is a little door there through the hallway that will allow you to walk below the roof of the garage and then enter the house through the other side in
Right,
case
okay.
it's raining and you're coming from the street and you do not want to get wet.
Right, and so, I mean, how do you see people visiting you? Obviously, somebody's going to be there to open up the giant gate for the driveway. if somebody comes by the house.
That is an excellent question. I would foresee installing a video camera in front of the big gate for the car entry, so people can ring the bell and we can, through a clicker, allow them access. I think it's a better way, if we are having guests, to have them entering through the driveway and the main door than through the little side door on the north side.
Right. Okay, so working our way around the building then, one thing that's a little disappointing to me is that these drawings don't really show the elevations as well as they could, I don't think. When you look at, for example, the golf course side of the house, looking back at the pool,
Yes.
there appears to be, there's a stair that runs up there. Is that stair exposed or is that totally hidden by landscaping?
No, from the golf course, there will be a hedge that will be completely cover the swimming pool and the deck area.
Okay, so when we look at that east elevation, then we see the pool. Is that going to be actually a glass panel?
No. That is just a vertical elevation so you can understand the position of the pool. But
Yeah,
the
but that's what I mean. I mean, the
Yeah.
drawings are they're sort of misleading, because the things that are important to us is what you see when you stand away from the building, not looking at the pool cutaway, for example. It's the same for the south elevation. You show the pool exposed there, but in fact, it's not really. It's behind. Is there a berm there coming up to the pool, or is that going to be?
That is correct. There is a deck, and there is a deck side on the pool, and some set of steps that would allow you to go down to ground level. So
Right.
you are completely right. The pool will be enclosed within the pool walls and that deck structure, and then the hedge that will separate us from the golf
Right.
course.
But if you go to the south elevation, we can't see that, if you know what I'm saying. I mean, in other words, the south elevation of the building just shows, again, it shows the pool water, but I'm more interested in what's happening in front of the pool water and where the stairs are. So, and how the grade works there too. I mean, in other words, I believe the ground is bermed up against that wall. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question? I'm a little bit lost there.
Behind the mask.
Yes.
I believe that the earth is bermed up against the south side of the house. Is that correct? It slopes up to the house, to the foundation?
That is correct. And I think that the best way to visualize that in 3D is to look at the render of the size of the house that shows you a little bit of that berm. Yes, there.
Right, okay. Yeah, well, okay, all right. So anyhow, so that's the way that works. And then on the north side of the building, there's also a set of steps that we can't see. Are they behind landscaping as well?
That is correct. There is a hedge there, and we intend to have a way to get it down from the deck on the north side down to ground level, and that is correct. The
Okay.
north elevation doesn't show those steps. I apologize for that.
And so when you stay on the north side for 1 second, could you pull that up again, Joe? Can you explain to me how what's happening at the foundation wall level? Is that going to be planted against the house itself? Or is the hedge standing away from the house, and is it neatly trimmed the way it shows up there?
Excellent question. We intend the house to protrude a few inches from the foundation, and then to paint the foundation black to make it recede or disappear, so it feels like the house is a little bit like floating in the air, okay? Now, we do not intend to plant material right next to the foundation. We believe that the plant material is better set and on closer to the neighbor limit. So there will be like a cushion or room, so you can actually access the property and walk around of the property if you have to. And the bamboo groves on the north side will accomplish that nicely.
Right, okay, all right. Let's see. A few other questions I had regarding this. We don't have a window schedule, right? Window door schedule submitted as part of this? Is that correct, Jordan?
No, there is no window schedule.
Okay, so can you give me a rough idea of how big these windows are?
And I wouldn't know up from my head or memory the exact size of the window. I think the proportions of the windows are set up in the elevations, but I'll be happy to talk to my architect and submit that information to you. Those windows, we do have some freedom to make them a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller if we have to. We try to look at this in a way that is proportional and beautiful, and so they would make sense not only from the outside but also from the inside. A handful of those windows are what we call floor-to-ceiling windows, like the one we see in
The coral wall, right?
the coral stone, and to give that sense of amplitude. And some of the others, like the three ones to the left on the master bedrooms, they're a little bit more squarish and shorter. and so to provide a little bit of more privacy in the master bedroom. And we are more than happy to accommodate in that regard the design to whatever the commission think makes more sense. We don't have a strong feeling in that regard, okay?
Well, I think something that would help this project, especially given what Jordan and Abraham had to say about the number of openings, is that there is some thought given to the hierarchy of these windows. For example, I completely understand that giant tall window in the coral wall in a big public space.
Right.
I guess that one's in a bedroom. But anyhow, the taller walls in the living room, for example, I understand the scale of those. They seem to make sense. But then to see that same thing repeated in that bedroom doesn't make any sense to me. And
those could be smaller. We don't see a problem with that, sir, really. And it's a valid point. It's not important.
So what I'm saying is I think there needs a window schedule would be really helpful. And I believe that just having your architect think about some sort of hierarchy and how he's arranging these windows, because right now they seem very arbitrary to me. That's a completely, and I'll freely admit, that's a completely subjective viewpoint on my part. But I'm just saying that's the way the house reads to me right now, and I understand what Abraham and Jordan are saying about the way the openings work. I think if there was something going on with them that had more logic behind it, it would really help the elevations out a lot. The other question, hold on one second. The other questions I had on this were, there are no contours right on your site plan right now. So how do you intend to drain the site? In other words, there's nothing shown there as to where the water's going to go from the big flat roofs that you have. What's the intent behind it?
And yes, well, we will have the option through the flat roof schedule to divert the water a little bit towards the north and a little bit more towards the south because of the breadth of space that we have on the south side. And we can create a little contour on the landscape on both sides. And I have a bachelor degree in landscape architecture from my previous life in Washington, D.C., when I used to do this for a living. So I can draw that, and we think it will be a very good way to make the water flow directly towards the golf course along the sides of the house. Okay, the house will obviously be high enough. We don't expect any problem with the house itself. And we also intend to.
In fact, I'm glad you have a background in the landscape architecture. That's great. I'm just saying that it seems to me that there needs to be some way of detaining the water somewhere on the site before it goes out into the golf course.
Well, Mr. Harris, I think a lot of this will be determined when this goes in front of engineering.
All right.
That's less our issue than it is in engineering.
Well, the only reasons I'm bringing this up is, again, it's going to affect how the house looks because of the way it works around the site. That's the only reason I'm bringing it up. But I completely agree with you.
If I may, one thing I can also add in that regard is that we are working on a foundation design that will allow some of the water, in case we have a catastrophic storm, to flow below the house. There will be like an opening there to let the water flow. I think those kind of foundations are becoming fashionable these days due to the increasing hurricane periodicity and so on and so forth. And but for everyday rain, we believe that the size, the north and south axis contour will naturally allow the water to flow towards the golf course. Yeah.
All right.
Other
Yeah, I have
questions?
a question since he brought this up about the north side of the house. I live on the north side of that house. So,
nice.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I actually was in your house because I noticed it was for sale. It had an open house the other weekend, and I had a chance to go in, and it was lovely. I'm sorry, to miss you as a neighbor.
Oh, okay. Well, that's nice that you came to look at it. And if I don't get what I want for it, I'm not selling it. So that's, my only concern is how the ground is contoured to the north. Is it going to be a wall of dirt? Is it going to be mounded somehow? And then you're talking about a 7-foot setback. That's really not a lot of space to work with grading the ground and putting in all these plants. So I'm wondering how all that's going to work, because I have no flooding in my yard, but I know the neighbor to the south has serious flooding in their backyard when there's heavy rains. I mean, they get probably a foot of water, standing water. So that's my big concern, is the runoff and how that's going to be addressed, because I have a crawl space under my house. I do have an opening.
Yes, the setback between the north side of the building and your property, if I recall correctly, it's 5 feet. I think we extended that to 7.5. Jordan, if I'm mistaken, please correct me, okay?
Well, you have it at 7.5, yeah.
Okay, we gave it a little bit of more room there, obviously, with a 20 feet setback because of the easement on the other side, and the fact that we are trying to cramp all this into a 1-story dwelling. It's kind of hard to achieve, you know, the goals of our projects unless we go to close to the limits. And that's what we have done everywhere, with the exception of your side where we have a little bit more space. And what we intend to do over there is, I have a little sketch. I don't know if you can see it. No, you can't see anything. Basically that 7.5 feet distance will have a swell in the middle, which we will cover with gravel, to be sure that the water that drains on that side, which will be minimum, because we have the option to, with a flat roof, to direct the water whichever way we want to, okay? And that should really protect you, Judy, from that problem. I have some experience in this regard, and I feel confident. On the north side of that little swell, we will have the bamboo. And that also will create, through the root mat, okay, a solid soil structure that will help to keep that bank and the water, you know, in between.
Okay, yeah, with regard to the bamboo, just for your information, I planted bamboo on the south side of my house.
Okay.
It was gorgeous, and I loved it, but it's terribly messy. And I had to clean the roof probably every month, just so you know. They drop a lot of leaves. They're beautiful, but they are messy. So you might want to consider something else that is less maintenance.
I'll be happy to consider something else. I know about the maintenance of bamboo. I also know about the problem of clamping, and we are planning to use a variety that doesn't shoot runners, so it doesn't quite expand in every direction, okay? Mm-hmm. And it is a beautiful plan for this type of architecture, and but considering that we are also planning to use it on the south side, if there is something there that will work similarly, I'll be happy to take that into consideration. Yeah. To tell you the truth, from our perspective in the house, we are not going to see much of that bamboo unless we are in the garage, because the house looking north, it's on the blind side of the house. And that was set up more for your benefit than ours. And we certainly want to make you happy. And that is something that will create a maintenance issue, and we can replace it for something else. We'll be happy to. I want to be a good neighbor.
Well, I'm telling you, no, and I love bamboo, believe me. I'm just telling you, for your own sake, with the flat roof, we get a lot of wind in that being on the golf course there, a lot of wind coming from the east, the northeast, and it creates a lot of droppings from the bamboo, and it'll get stuck in your roof. I'm just telling you, it's going to be an issue.
It is a valid point, Judy, and we will take it into consideration as we rethink the project.
Okay.
as you can imagine, we have already spent quite amount of time and money developing the first design and now our second design. And we are a little hesitant to keep on improving in it and providing all the information necessary until we know we can move forward with it. Once we know and before permitting, we'll be happy to work all these details to be sure that they're in compliance and that everybody's happy.
Hey, I'm just telling you for your own sake.
Thank you, Ms. Chess.
Thank you.
Are there
Yeah.
other questions from other board members?
Bill, I have a question.
Yes.
It seems like we have a regular lot here, but you have an additional 20-foot easement on which you're putting your driveway, correct?
Correct.
Okay, has that easement been granted yet?
No.
So you are actually filling up the full lot with house and using the easement as the driveway?
Correct. As we approach the office of planning and they review the setbacks of this lot, those were the information that we were given, what we can and could not do. Judy.
Judy, if I may, the south part was a 20 feet of abandoned right-of-way that the city abandoned, and then it's actually functionally part of the lot. As one of the conditions of approval, staff is requesting an easement on their property to allow for continued access. When the right-of-way was abandoned, it should have been requested at that time. So the condition of approval is to require the easement on the previously abandoned right-of-way.
So the lot is not a 50-foot lot, it's a 70-foot lot.
Correct.
Okay, does that, and
It's a
I don't know.
70-foot lot where they can't put a structure on the south 20 feet because of the
Okay, but does that change the percentages of how much house they can have on a piece of land? Or is there even one? I don't know.
Yeah, there is. So they have they do have the total 70-foot lot. I don't have the LDRs right specifically in front of me. So if you were Jordan on that.
And all of the specs are right. It just seems like a lot of house for a little lot. I guess that's where I'm coming from.
Judy, it's William, Sustainability
Yeah.
Director. The numbers that were provided by Jordan are based on a larger lot configuration because the 70-foot by 135-foot lot constitutes a larger lot. And so we don't restrict them to the numbers just for a 50-foot lot because the lot is actually almost 50% bigger than that.
So basically that's why the house is looking so massive as opposed to the houses around it.
Well,
because they're dealing with 70 feet as opposed to 50.
Right, and they've squeezed all their development on the north side to make sure that that 20-foot future easement to the city is all clear. And so I will say if you compare the first design that was approved for the lot several years ago under the same LDRs, this proposal is much, much smaller and shorter. Well,
it's got to be shorter, but you still got to have that 10-foot thing is killing you. I understand that, but my question is, as we have had the last couple of weeks, these horrendous rains, if you got a flat roof, that's going to go, you've talked about the drainage, and so forth, but some of these things you just can't keep up with. I mean, that's what worries me about you being built up, which is according to the law, that you have to have for the flood zone. But it boggles my mind where the water's going to go.
If I may, Judy, two things. And on the issue of the footprint of the house, part of the sacrifice that we had to do when we decided that it was not feasible to build a 2-story house and have to downsize to a 1-story house. That's when the house got a little bit bigger on the footprint, but much shorter, which we think it's a good trade-off, okay? And the fact that we have a flat roof will allow us to control which way, that water will go, how to work with those downspouts so we can locate them in the best possible way to channel the water, not so much in this case towards the north neighbor side, but towards the south where we seem to have a much wider bird, okay?
Well, one of the questions there is you're talking about funneling this water towards the golf course. And William, maybe you can answer this. Can they do that?
There is a requirement that a certain amount of the water be retained on site and then allowed to drain either toward the storm drain on Lakeside Drive, or it could bleed into the golf course. And that's something that's engineering is going to have to work out with him at the time of permitting. And the rules have changed a little bit over time, and we are probably going to be a little more stringent than in the past because we have some newer developments that have not managed their water overly well. I will say that with the proposed flat roof, he can control the release of the water far better than if it were a pitched, either gable fronted or hipped roof, because his roof could actually serve as what's called a cool or wet roof for a period of time and then release the water a little bit more slowly. So I think that he'll have the opportunity to manage his water runoff far better than someone proposing a more traditional house with a pitched roof.
Okay, is there any such thing as a cistern anymore? You know, where they used to gather the water and maybe not let it run off?
No, in Florida.
You know, I think that it's time for us to move on to other issues. This is not within our purview as a historic district board. The issues of water runoff are really in the purview of the engineering department here. Are there other questions from board members?
Well, one of the other questions I had is you talked about in the thing is the glass doors. I thought we weren't supposed to have glass doors.
And to tell you the truth, I'll be happy to have a solid wood door in it. Actually, my wife prefers them. So
I know we went through this a couple meetings ago where the guy wanted a glass door and we turned them down.
That is not set in stone. We can change.
That's no problem. And also redirecting some of the water towards the water drainage on the street sounds like a wonderful idea to me. It doesn't all have to go back towards the golf. So we can work with that as well. I don't see a problem, really.
Okay. That's just a couple questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments from other board members? I have three quick comments. One is about the bamboo. You are almost a landscape architect. You might want to hold whatever your hedging material is back away from the back property line so that you can gain actual visual space from your neighbors and they can gain visual space from you. So the back 20 feet of your property, you may want to have less vegetation, less privacy. It's up to you. Next item is the coral stone. I understand, I could be wrong, but I think that it's no longer legal from Florida locations. You may end up going to the Dominican Republic, I think, to get coral stone if you want the real thing.
That is correct. Yes, that's where people imported from mostly. Yes, sir.
Okay, and the last item is back to the windows issue. Yes, your windows are large. I like the idea from Mr. Harris that perhaps they want to be looked at again as a hierarchy. The only thing that bothers me are the three skinny windows on the front. That they are out of keeping with everything else. Remember, we are in an historic district. Mm-hmm. If I were designing this, I might even have done a wood siding or a shingle siding or something rather than the coral stone to mix a little bit better with the neighborhood. But you've gone with the coral stone. But windows in that neighborhood tend to be vertical, which is fine, which you're doing, but not quite those proportions. Perhaps you want to do, instead of three, you do one or two wider ones that have a little bit of a relationship with the usual double hung windows in the neighborhood.
I'll be happy to do that. I will work with the department to design that. So I don't see a problem. Originally, that front wall was blind, and the recommendation of the architects was that in order to improve that we broke that and to add a window. And we thought that those little thin 3 ones were a good way to go, but it can be anything literally. So that is not a problem.
Okay. Presumably issues like that will be taken care of by staff during permitting. Are there any other questions or thoughts from board members? If not, we'll go on to public comment. I don't know if it's possible to get other public comment tonight. We did get one letter sent to us from a neighbor across the street. Mr. Hodges, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I can read that into the record. But Sherry, did we receive any other public comment today?
I have not received anything else.
Okay. We did have one item which I forwarded earlier. I'll go ahead and read that into the record. This is from a J.L. Thompson at 311 North Lakeside Drive. Dear members of the Historic Preservation Commission, I am writing to express my concern about the style, size, height, and for the proposed dwelling at 302 North Lakeside Drive, which is in the Old Lucerne Historic District. I live across the street from the proposed house in a 1920s bungalow and enjoy living in a neighborhood comprised of Lake Worth Beach cottages and historic homes. I have seen the architectural renderings of the proposed home and believe that the contemporary style, size at 3,096 square feet and building height are incompatible with the existing homes and nature of the neighborhood. By comparison, my home is 1,368 square feet. The proposed home at 3,096 square feet is more than twice the size of my home. Many of the houses in my immediate neighborhood have been on the Cottages of Lake Worth Beach tour. These tours have highlighted the unique and now well-known gems located in historic Lake Worth Beach. The Historic Preservation Commission is charged with determining whether proposed homes will adversely affect the historic charm and antique quality of our neighborhoods. There have been new homes built in the vicinity, which are of appropriate size and scale for the area. One such home is located at the corner of North Ocean Breeze and 3rd Avenue North. I therefore request that the commission deny the application for the certificate of appropriateness. Sincerely, Ms. Thompson.
Do we have any other public comments? If not,
I'd like to just, and I know you specifically said that we should not be in the purview of this commission based on water. However, with recent events that have just happened, this particular property with the abandoned 3rd Avenue as it goes eastward toward the intercoastal, as all of our stormwater in the city goes eastward toward the intercoastal. And I'm not sure whether 3rd Avenue qualifies for this, but a lot of them are low, and they kind of serve as an overflow sheet runoff of heavy stormwater. I don't know whether this carries all the way through the golf course because you have indulations of the ground, but I do know that the city did a major stormwater project right around the corner on 2nd Avenue and the golf course on Gulfview that incorporated a swirl box of some sort because of how much water comes into this particular area. And it is a low area. And also, the same thing happens over at the bridge. They warn everybody that the bridge, that whole area over there is very low. My concern is that when they're using this as an easement for storm water, yes, you have storm water underground, but you also have storm water above the ground too. And I'm hoping that engineering takes a look at that for the ground, because this is ground elevation. The house is going to be raised, but that ground elevation is maintained so that if there is some way that water coming from Federal Highway and points west can continue on down through that easement through the golf course and eventually get into the intercoastal, that I think should be taken into consideration. Whether it's a purview of this board or not, I have no idea, but I would like that to be considered because we are having similar issues further south of that type. We all got flooded out, and a lot of it has to do with the buildup of the properties on the intercoastal.
Yeah.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Good point. And again, we hope that engineering will hear our comments even though they're not within our purview.
Mr. Chairman, if I may say one last thing in response to the front neighbor letter, which I understand completely their sentiment. And I believe personally that with the new FEMA flood maps and the requirements for all future building to be 5 feet above the ground in this area, that the time to build a small cottage on such a hillside that will have to be built, it's gone. I don't think no one will be able to go to that and build in that way. I believe that contemporary architecture is especially adequate to confront these type of problems and adaptations. And I think in the future, more projects like this probably will be suited to the city of Lake Puerto Beach.
I think you're absolutely right. I think 20 years from now, that street will look rather different from what it does. And I do think that your house has complied with the requirements of that neighborhood.
Thank you, sir.
Can we get a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
Mr. Harris, yes.
I move to approve HRPB project number 20-001-00205 with staff recommended conditions for certificate of appropriateness for the new construction of a plus or minus 3,096 square foot single-family structure at 302 North Lakeside Drive, based upon the competent substantial evidence in the staff report and pursuant to the City of Lake Worth Beach land development regulations and historic preservation requirements.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
I second.
Ozzy, seconding. Thank you. Any more discussion before we vote?
Nope.
Hearing none. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Welcome to Lake Worth, and
Thank you.
Thank you.
good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All righty. We are now on to item B, and I assume that Aaron will be honchoing item B.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Whenever you're ready, I'm happy to begin the staff presentation related to this item.
Take it away.
All right. So just let me get started here. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
There we
Sorry,
go.
it's reading a little different tonight. So good evening. The item before you is our next round of LDR amendments. This will be in ordinance 20-20. As you recall, in March, the City Commission prioritized a series of code updates. This is really one of the last ordinances you'll see, and the bulk of we've done a lot of work this year. So you can see that the land development regulations address temporary uses, some standards for accessory dwelling units, home occupations, and some off-street parking. The first section specifically relates to it's a small change to standardize easement requirements for zero lot line properties by requiring a 3-foot easement on the non-zero side of the lot. In Exhibit B, this establishes a new temporary use permit process for temporary uses. The bulk of the uses that we have established as part of these changes are related to construction and parking, establishing standards for those types of uses. Exhibit C, this is basically adding some of the new permitted or the new temporary uses we've established, including their supplementary regulations, adding those temporary uses to the use table by zoning district. Exhibit D addresses second or accessory dwelling units. This adds some clarifies size and construction standards for accessory dwelling units, and it also clarifies that there's it clarifies the parking. There's a parking amendment in there and the parking standards related to accessory dwelling units. And we also clarify that the parking in lieu fee is only available in the core area. The amendments also address home occupation. It provides for some additional flexibility in home occupations in mixed use districts only, not in residential, not in the single family or the single family or the two family dwelling unit residential districts. This is for our mixed use districts only. This is
Erin, are you going to go back and discuss each of these exhibits or not?
I wasn't going to. I was just going to kind of highlight what they are. We can go through any of the exhibits you'd like to talk about and just kind of talk about the scope like we usually do. If you'd like to go and kind of go into detail, or you have any questions about how they'll operate, I'm happy to do that.
Why don't you finish your overview and then we'll go back. How's that?
Okay, absolutely. So we've got the off-street parking requirements related to dwelling units. This also addresses the other issue that I mentioned. And then that concludes my presentation. So what do you want to talk about specifically?
All right, well, let's go back. Well, on the first item, on-site drainage, give me an example of a zero lot line building that is not zero lot line on the other side.
So most zero lot lines, especially when they're established, they're zero lot. Well, they have a zero setback on one side of the lot, and then they have a setback, an actual setback on the other. So on the non-zero setback side, there would be a 3-foot maintenance easement provided.
I mean, do we have these in the city?
We
This would
do
be sort of
have,
like a Charleston side yard house. Kind of.
and this is really,
This is William. We have zero lot line buildings all up and down Lake and Lucerne avenues. If new ones were to come, and in several of our districts, we allow a zero side setback. This is intended to allow for those buildings to be maintained and have an easement or maintenance easement on the adjacent property or where necessary. I honestly do not know how some of the buildings downtown get maintained if the adjoining property owner does not allow the person to go on their property to maintain their property next door.
Mm-hmm.
This would deal with that.
Okay, because I'm thinking of zero lot line buildings are zero lot line on both sides.
We have those downtown too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you said though earlier about the Charleston houses, those are the conditions that make the most sense.
Yeah.
so we kind of just wanted to establish a minimum standard for when this would occur, that it would be in the LDRs, that we could request the 3-foot easement. And it's in 2 locations. The reason why it's in 2 exhibits, it's in Exhibit A and Exhibit G. It's because it's reflected in 2 chapters in the Code of Ordinances. The first chapter would be Chapter 18 in utilities, and the second would be in Chapter 23, which is our LDRs. So we were just putting it in 2 places in the code to really clarify that we're requiring this 3-foot easement. If it could be, most likely we're not going to get new lots. We may get a new lot, but maybe when something comes in for new investment, that might be an opportunity to ask for that to make things work a little bit better.
Any other board members have comments on Exhibit A, or shall we move on to B?
Move on.
Move on to B.
Okay, so this is our new temporary use permit process. Basically, so for example, sometimes you'll see an application and it will say it's a conditional use, and there's conditional use review standards. So we also have an administrative use process in addition to the conditional use process. And basically it's for when a use comes in, it has to meet certain regulatory and review standards and follow a specified review process. We don't really have a specific process for temporary use. And so what we've done is we've basically outlined that process and established review criteria. The review criteria are all on page 7 of your ordinance in your backup packet. They include land use compatibility, compliance with other regulations, duration of the use, traffic circulation and on-site circulation, off-street parking, litter control, signage, appearance and nuisances, and then other conditions as applicable to the use.
What's the difference between a temporary use permit and a special event permit?
So a temporary use permit is going to be something that's lasting a little bit longer. So if you actually go, and these things kind of work, they work together, the two exhibits. And they're just, they're a little bit separated in the ordinance because the ordinance goes in order of the code. So if you go to Exhibit G, you can kind of see what some of those temporary uses are. There is a business office temporary that is permitted for 90-day basis. It has to be showed on a site plan for an approval of a permanent facility. There is a construction field office, construction staging offsite, a temporary parking lot, a residential sales office, and model homes. So those are kind of the temporary uses we have envisioned that might be the most commonly utilized. And,
As opposed to someone during a street painting festival who wants to put up a booth and sell trinkets. That would be a special event permit.
Correct. That would be under the special event permit, and then they would need to register as a vendor for that event.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yes, Chip.
This is quite a comprehensive new ordinance covering all of this. Am I to take it that all of this previous to the temporary use permit was being handled under a conditional use permit? Or was this not addressed?
No, it wasn't specifically addressed in the LDRs, but it was being reviewed as part of a construction permit. And maybe William wants to weigh in. So staff was looking at it for consistency with the LDRs and as much as feasible, but it just didn't fit as well as having this process. It's a clearer process, and we feel like this is a better approach.
Well, I mean, it's listing pumpkins and Christmas trees and things like that, temporary farmers market, whatever that is. And how did those operate prior to this ordinance?
They were operating sort of in a vacuum, Mr. Guthrie. And some of our other parts of our code do allude to certain aspects of this being allowed. And then there was no process to actually allow them. And so we're trying to make it consistent across the board and be unbiased. There are some exceptions for nonprofits and religious organizations when it comes to things you just mentioned versus for-profit. We're trying to get ahead of the game because as we get more popular and more residents moving in, there are uses that are popping up left and right that were never considered in our old code or in this one. In regards to the temporary construction site, staging site, parking, sales offices, we have a lot of construction on the way. There are as many as 1,000 residential units across almost a dozen properties or projects in some type of review or entitlement or pre-application throughout the city. And we're having to get ahead of the game on how to plan for the parking for those workers, where would they stage their construction materials. It was kind of willy-nilly, and we need to make it a more formal process. So we're trying to get ahead of what we anticipate will become a problem later.
Can I ask a question? Just for an example, somebody is going to build a development, maybe like the Mid, maybe not that big, but not on that large of a piece of property. If somebody were to build a house like we just approved on South Lakeside Drive, there's not going to be too much parking on that lot. Everybody's going to park on the street. Is the general contractor on that going to be required to get a temporary use permit of some sort in order to
to house the vehicles that are working on the site? Good question.
In some instances, they could. The single family is a little bit different in that we do have regulations that prevent those vehicles being there after certain hours. In other areas of the city, commercial vehicles could be there all the time. And so there's actually appears to be a more availability of parking in the single family areas where a new house may be built versus a larger project being built smack in the downtown or on Dixie Highway. And the Mid is a very good example. The Mid did all their parking and staging on CRA-owned land just to the north. But if that property had not been available from the CRA, we would have had every neighborhood around there yelling at us about the contractors and the subs and everybody and the staging taking place in some place it was off-site. So that was a impetus to get this started, because we have other projects like the Bohemian that is coming. That's very large, and it will be difficult for them to stage a lot of it on the site, especially their parking for workers. So they're going to have to work with us to figure out where those workers are going to park and not be a nuisance to the neighbors and the businesses in that area.
It's into enforcement then. So you just mentioned the Bohemian. When that comes online, you'll get with the contractors or developer on that particular property. And how will you be able to grant them a temporary use permit for parking, say, on that one? Where will they park, or where will they stage? And then if they exceed that or overflow that, what enforcement is there? Is, you know, in many of our ordinances and things like that, we have ordinances, and we have a couple that are going to be mentioned here a little later, that there's no teeth in them. What is are you going to revoke their temporary use permit if they exceed it and overflow into the surrounding neighborhoods?
Well, they are going to have to meet the parameters of the conditions as Aaron outlined. The Bohemian's likely going to have to arrange temporary use of a number of properties, specifically when it comes to parking. As one, and this is just, I'm just putting it out there as an example, they may arrange with the CRA to use some of the parking on the CRA's owned site in between Lake and Lucerne for some of their use. We already issue, and you may go by there now, you'll see that East Coast Street has been closed off entirely to allow the Echo building to have a new roof put on it. It will be a sort of gentle dance among public services, code compliance in our office, as well as PBSO to enforce this. I'm sure we haven't figured out every nuance of how to avoid something negative happening, but we've done the best we can because we don't have very many examples. I mean, the Bohemian, as an example, will be the first 7-story building built in the city since Lake Worth Towers, which was over 50 years ago. So we're trying to cover as many bases as we can, but we are not likely to foresee every aspect that might come about.
Will we be attempting to address this? I think we have an issue right now because all of our enforcement is through PBSO, and PBSO really, I want to say, almost refuses to enforce city ordinances. They're there to enforce state statutes and things like that. So is this just going to be one more issue that when something does happen, there's really not going to be anybody to call? And I know that in town of Palm Beach, because they have their own enforcement over there, they can enforce their ordinances, and that is how they keep people, from parking where they're not supposed to park over there during these things. I just don't, I see these as being proactive on this. I'm just trying to see how it's going to work in the overall scheme of, what Lake Worth does. And I mean, you are addressing it. I just don't see it being implemented. And is it just going to be another hurdle for a developer to cross? Okay, he's going to come here with a development, and this is one more hurdle. We have to figure out how we're going to park vehicles. And there is no place within a quarter of a mile to park vehicles for this particular development. So, is this going to be something that's going to be just lead to more frustration?
don't believe so. And I appreciate your comments about PBSO, and what we've done over the past year and a half is expanded the code compliance activities. Now public services through refuse, some of their officers, their people have been authorized to serve as code compliance officers and have been to face training. Our parking enforcement under Larry Lightfoot is expanding, and their authority in the city has grown. We have now instituted having building staff patrol the city on the weekends, where that has never happened in the city. And we also have code compliance officers working on the weekends. So I think among the combined effort of all those 4 entities, the enforcement of things will improve. We have had a bit of a lull per se because of COVID. We did have compassionate code compliance that was instituted back in March. That is coming to an end at the end of the calendar year. And I empathize greatly with various residents who have somewhat suffered because of that compassionate approach to code compliance because of COVID. But I think you'll see a remarked improvement in code compliance efforts. If they haven't already started, they will definitely begin as of January 1.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Waters, too. Exhibit C is we've already talked about it in a way.
Yeah, that is the actual table, the use table. And what we did is we amended the specialty use table and the series of use tables, and we added temporary uses to the bottom of the table because they're kind of their own unique thing.
So Exhibit D, are there any comments from board members?
What does the T mean?
The T means temporary use.
Okay, thank you.
Because it's normally our use table has A's and C's and P's. So it's permitted use, administrative use, and conditional use.
Okay, thank you.
That one what?
Exhibit D, this establishes, basically, it actually just kind of really clarifies and consolidates. We have these standards in other aspects of the code, and other sections of the code, and it really just brings them all together in the consolidates in secondary dwelling unit 1.
In Exhibit D, what is a parcel? Number of secondary units per parcel. Is that per 50 by 135 lot?
It's a property. A parcel is a property.
All right, so even if an applicant has a very large lot, it will still only be available for one secondary dwelling unit.
Yes.
If it's a single family dwelling unit, yeah.
It's a single family district. It'll be one single family home per the lot or per the parcel. And
can I just say in chapter 23, the only thing that's changing is what's underlined. So in other words, you're establishing a minimum square footage, establishing that it must be compatible to the architectural style of the original dwelling or structure, and that they must meet city's established minimum housing code requirements.
And these things were all alluded to in other sections of the code, but if you just wanted to go and look up what you needed to do for an accessory dwelling unit, you wouldn't have all of that information in one location. So really, this was just an opportunity to clarify and consolidate.
Exhibit E, questions, comments?
Yes.
I have a question. What is Class 1 and Class 2?
Well, oh, go ahead, William. This is your section.
In response to interest in COVID, and then I had a stroke of an idea. Right now, we're changing the name of a traditional home occupation to a Class 1, which are allowed across the city in a residential area. There can be no more than 3, I think, home occupations in a single house. You can't have customers. You can't have employees. You're limited to what you can actually do. But I've watched and seen over time a number of home occupations, businesses grow from a very small entity to an entire empire. Bethany Frankel on Bravo is one who created Skinny Girl martinis and everything out of her dining room. And then the guy from Flipping Out, Jeff something, his whole design firm is in his home. I'm not proposing that, but what also came out of COVID was so many people working from home, and many of them could not conduct their business in the same fashion, but they're going to want to stay home. So we were proactive in coming up with a Class 2 home occupation that is only allowable in the mixed use districts, which allow these businesses and professional offices already, but they could happen in a limited fashion in someone's own residence in those districts. There will be a small number of employees that will be allowed, a small number of clients. There's a restriction on how large the business can be in a particular residence that will be verified through a plan and by a use and occupancy inspection. And again, we're trying to get ahead of the curve and make Lake Worth Beach on the cutting edge of dealing with what the new normal will be. I will already say that 4 cities have called and wanted copies of what we're proposing because they thought it was something they'd like to do as well. We have set the standard over the past 10 years on a number of progressive ideas on how to do development, encourage economic investment in the city. Our artisanal industrial zone was one of them. The Sustainable Bonus Program was another one. The TDR program was yet another one. So this is another evolution of our trying to be proactive and encourage investment. I likely will see larger units. We already have 3 projects that are in some stage of planning where they would like to utilize this approach to a professional home occupation. And the units that are being proposed are somewhat larger than a traditional apartment, and they will generate higher rents. And then those people who are living there and working there at the same time will be feet on the street 24/7 versus only when they're at home. And so we see it as a way to encourage more activity in the city, more people to move here, more businesses to open. And there's been a great deal of conversation, at least over the past 6 or 7 years, that a number of people wanted to be able to do more of a broader range of businesses and could not find a small enough space that they could lease or rent. So this is one way to facilitate that. So there's been a lot of excitement from the development community on this idea, and hopefully it will receive your support as well.
I have a quick question on that. I assume that this applies to the townhouses that the CRA put up just west of the tracks. And a lot of those do have advertising, signage and so on in their windows. Why is no signage allowed?
Well, the ones that were there were built as live-work units. A live-work unit is different than a professional office or a professional home occupation Class 2. That use is already allowed, and they were designed as offices and could have signage. But let's say that you're in a multi-story condominium building and you're an architect and your project has been approved in or conditional use to allow professional home offices. I don't think we would like to see every professional home office or class office have a sign sitting out on the street advertising that those people are inside that building conducting business.
So in fact, there's sort of a Class 1, Class 2, and then Class 3 is the real live-work unit.
Yes, we just don't call the live-work unit a Class 3, but yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
William, I've got a question. And again, it goes back to enforcement. We've had, and that's even with the home occupation license that we are allowing at this time, because I mean, I know that in my own neighborhood, it was a single family neighborhood, and we had somebody that was operating well above the requirements, storing stuff outside in his yard and having more employees show up to the business and or advertise on the property. And when we complained, when the neighbors complained about it, the city was unable to do anything about it. And as a matter of fact, he's moved over a street and still operates in the same fashion. And in other words, it's like, why bother if somebody is going to take advantage of this? Basically, if anybody complains and has a problem with it, he says, hey, look, I got a home occupation license. I can do whatever I want, and let the city come and take it away from me for whatever reason. And it's just the enforcement is not there. So, and I know I'm speaking of in a single family neighborhood, where this is not even supposed to be allowed. The other question I had was why, if I've tried at one time, a long time ago, I'm in a commercial district and I was told that I could not have more than one occupational license for my property on Dixie Highway. And here, I thought that was odd back then, that in a home, you could have 3 occupational licenses, where in a commercial district, you could only have 1. And is there some, I'm sure there's something I'm missing when it comes to the planning, because that's not my strong point, but these are things that have come up over the years that have made my eyebrows go up. I was wondering if you could address those.
Well, and this process will allow multiple or a variety of business licenses to be at the same location. The instance that you were describing in your own particular case was unique in the city, in that the business, as I recall, there were 3 business licenses, of which each one had a different ownership or proprietorship, and you wanted them all to be one. And we did not have a way to do that because each business or entity was registered in a different name, even though they were owned by the same person. And we don't actually have the ability to do that. So that's a nuance of the business tax receipt that's governed by Florida statute, as well as the business license component piece itself. We are likely to sort of fall into a similar situation, possibly, when there needs to be 2 business licenses at the same location for 2 different types of professional offices. I can't see, let's just say there's a husband and a wife, both of them do something that's professional office. They both want their own professional office class 2 business licenses. It would have to go through that approval process. There will be inspections required, whereas the home occupation does not fall under the use and occupancy inspections that have to happen every 3 years. This would. And so people would have to be open to the fact that we're going to come in and verify at least once every 3 years that the area being used for the business is following the rules of which it was established. So that will be a little bit more work on a compliance standpoint. And again, this is not a by right process. They will have to be approved project by project or building by building. And so there are some, let's just say, for example, if somebody wanted to come in and convert Lake Worth Towers to more of a residential aspect, they would have to come to the city and request a conditional approval to allow this to even be allowed in their building. It isn't a by right just straight away.
Okay, and then enforcement again, what would, if you inspected somebody's house and they take more than 60% of the.
Enforcement of anything in Florida is a challenge because 162, the co-compliant statute, basically puts the preponderance of evidence on the city to enforce, and then we are a property right state. And so the co-compliance process can go on forever, it seems, until we actually foreclose. So we put as many restrictions as we possibly can. If you look on to ensure it's not going to become a nuisance, I can't imagine or can't envision every nuance of what someone may come up with. If we based our rules on what someone might do or might choose to do, we would allow nothing in the city, because I can guarantee you we have an instance of everything we have in the city being broken in some way by somebody. So I don't think we are in a position where we can live under a rock and be afraid to be a little bit more creative to get investment in the city, especially in the times that we're in. And hopefully we will work the best we can to ensure that this is held, is complied. I do envision most of it's going to happen likely in a condominium or an apartment building, where the of that building or the management will be held responsible in some cases to ensure that things don't get out of hand.
I was actually just going to say that, HOAs and management companies have a lot of authority in Florida, actually. And so that would be a powerful component of regulating.
Yeah, a lot more than our neighbors do, in the neighborhoods, I guess.
And that's why we are proposing this only in the mixed use district. This doesn't include multifamily 30, multifamily 20, SFTF 14, or SFR. It is basically essentially the areas that are along our major thoroughfares.
Okay.
It's not
And these
within
were
neighborhoods.
areas that were previously had commercial zoning. And then with the mixed use districts were converted from exclusively commercial areas to commercial and residential mixed.
Okay.
So these were
makes sense.
previously like, you know, general commercial areas.
And therefore, that's why there's also parking restrictions in here too,
Yes.
as well as the number of employees per square footage and things like that, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, moving
have a
on.
Uh,
Do we have questions from other board members?
Yes, I have a question. What are the adult establishment? You explain to me.
Well, that's not definitely not a professional office occupation. So I think we'd start there. And so those would obviously not be covered by that. That's not a professional home office. So they're there.
All right.
All right, questions on exhibits G and I guess G is the last one, and H.
Yeah, so exhibit F is the off-street parking.
Oh, yeah.
And that just again, that's a little bit of cleanup. And then exhibit G is the other part of the other half of the temporary uses. So the first exhibit B that was about temporary uses established the temporary use process. And then this section is in Article 4, which is our development standards. And this establishes the specific development review standards for each proposed use individually. So in addition to all the review criteria temporary use has to comply with, there's also these additional considerations for the temporary uses.
Excuse me, Aaron, can we go back to exhibit F, please?
Okay. Yes.
And development regulations, off-street parking. In number 3 down below, this fee in lieu of parking on all uses on property in the core area, which on properties in the core area. Okay, so this is already in there. And the only thing we're doing is we're adding on properties in the core area, and then also unit A, location, only properties located in the core area. Okay, so that it delineates where the core area is. This fee in lieu of parking, not really fond of it because, you know, it's just money paid. What is a typical amount of money somebody have to pay in lieu of parking to the city?
It's $15,000 per space.
$15,000. And so that's somebody has to cut a check for $15,000 and then it goes into some sort of a part of the community benefits program.
No, no. To date, no one has paid into that fund since Rotelli's restaurant was converted and its use and occupancy was changed. And that money was paid back to them because we changed the rule that use and occupancy changes would not generate more parking. There actually is a core area parking trust fund. It's like an enterprise fund, but it's a separate account that's managed. I think it has maybe $50,000 in it at this point because almost no one's taken advantage of this program. But it is an option for people, and that money can only be spent to manage, design, construct, or facilitate parking in the core.
It could go towards a parking garage in the future if need be.
Yes, it could.
I think that was part of that, the 15,000 idea originally was to start building up the bank so that we could do some sort of a parking structure, wasn't it?
Exactly. And then when I arrived, they had reduced the in lieu parking fee from 15,000 to 7,500, which still didn't generate anyone actually utilizing the program. But the 7,500 wasn't going to get us anywhere. So we put it back to 15,000, I believe, a couple of years ago. And there has been a little bit of interest in utilizing it. And now that we're moving more forward to a unified or more master planned parking approach, I believe the commission is probably going to take up a workshop on downtown parking sometime in the first of the year. There is more likelihood that this money will be utilized to at least facilitate city improvements in city parking in the core area. And it may or may not include a parking garage.
This fluctuation in the price per space, we went from 15,000 down to 75, now back up to 15.
Yes.
I mean, if somebody needs, somebody's development in the core area requires an additional 20 spots or 30 spots, this is what this is going to be for, and then people are going to park where they're parking now anyway.
Well, until we can catch up. I mean, we do have coming online in the next 2 years. The city will long-term lease the first 2 floors of the Bohemians parking garage, which will provide 110 parking spaces to the public. That's one foray into providing more parking. And then there are studies to provide, facilitate an additional parking garage in the downtown. It's sort of a chicken and the egg kind of approach, unfortunately. Do we build the parking in advance of it being needed, or do we try to find the money and then address the problem after we've already got the problem? I think the city's trying to be proactive and fall somewhere in the middle, but building parking spaces in a structured parking garage could cost anywhere from about $22,000 to $30,000 a space, depending on how much the land costs and whether you can do a structured parking garage versus a specially designed garage.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And so that was Exhibit F. Exhibit G, I think Aaron went through. Are there any more questions on Exhibit G or going into Exhibit H? Questions from board members?
So Exhibit H is essentially the zero lot line easement, and that's, as we discussed before, that's in Exhibit A and Exhibit H, and it just is, we're putting that in 2 parts of the code to make sure that it's clear.
So a motion on this particular presentation would be to recommend to the city commission to approve the changes. I didn't see that, I'm sorry.
Yes, the motion is to recommend to the city commission to approve the ordinance.
If no one has any more comments, I'd like to make a motion.
Please do.
I move to recommend the city commission to adopt the proposed LDR text amendments included in the PZB HRPV project number 20-031000008, ordinance 20-20 with the attachments.
Second.
Moved by Chip, seconded by Judith Just. No further discussion, I guess. All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, William and Aaron.
Thank you. We are going to be, I think, setting a example across Florida of how to get ahead of what's been happening to us in the world. And you will see a significant amount of investment in new business incubation within the city in the next year or so.
Wonderful. All right. Shall we move on? I don't know that there are any public comments from anyone. If not, moving on to department reports.
I don't know whether the staff told you at the last meeting or not, but the entitlement application for the Gulfstream has been submitted. It's been through its first site plan review team review. We're awaiting their responses to those comments. I cannot give you an idea of when it's going to come to the preservation board. It will not be in December. We are looking or striving for it to be heard by you in January. So keep your fingers crossed. And other departmental reports, we are, just so you'll know, we are on par to have the busiest building division permit fiscal year ever. We're having to work through a budget amendment to hire another staff person. So the investment interest in the city is amazing, and we're getting some very high quality developers and interest in the city. I will say tomorrow I'm on a panel to review applications to the CRA for doing development at the Circle properties at A and B between Lucerne and Lake. I think there were 5 submissions. all very interesting. So that is yet another project in the pipeline that will show investment and new residents in the downtown, especially west of Dixie Highway. So it's all very exciting.
Excellent. Board member comments.
Abraham, do you have an item?
Yeah. So we just have a quick board notice, which I will go through now. So it's regarding a city condemnation of a property located at 129 South K Street. The subject property is a non-contributing resource to the Southeast Lucerne Local Historic District. In regards to location, it's on the northwest corner of South K Street and 2nd Avenue South. It's highlighted in red. It currently contains 2 structures, each with 2 units. So the property currently holds a total of 4 dwelling units. This photo shows one of the structures seen from 3rd Avenue South. Essentially, there was a use and occupancy inspection at this property for their rental license that revealed major structural issues as shown in these pictures. As these photos show, a portion of the wall collapsed and revealed a lot of deteriorated wood in this structure.
Obviously, not a lot of floor space.
Yeah. So following this use and occupancy inspection, our city building official did an inspection of the property. And on October 19, 2020, it was deemed as unsafe. So in our historic preservation ordinance, section 23.5-4M, we have certain exceptions for a certificate of appropriateness, and that includes condemnation by the city for a structure. So this would fall into that category. And when this is the case, they don't need any formal approval by the board. We're just required to provide a notice of what has taken place. So yeah, presentation of the board notice for this condemnation. Since it's been condemned, we have met with an agent for the property owner, and it sounds like they have plans for redevelopment in the near future.
Thank you. We have been notified. Any other department reports? Any board member comments?
I've got a question. I don't know if it belongs here or where you can tell me to go, which people have. How in the world do we get the retailers on Lake and Lucerne to clean up the sidewalks in front of their house, in front of their businesses, like with a hose and a broom?
Judy, it's funny you asked that question. Some of you may know my mother's family is from London, and as a child spending time with my grandmother, you go down to the shops and each shopkeeper is sweeping their sidewalk. Yeah. What we have encountered in the 10 years that I've been here, and the CRA struggled with it longer than that, the purveyors downtown and the business owners expect the city to clean the sidewalk and do all that work, which unfortunately the CRA does not have funds that fall under the maintenance category. Our public services does the best they can, but I encourage you as residents of the city to encourage your business owners in the downtown of whom you support to maybe try a little harder.
Okay. I just didn't know where it belonged, and it just looks awful.
It's like you're required to maintain your part of the right of way that's a swale. Theoretically, the property owners downtown should be required to maintain their sidewalks. That has not happened. There are a few that do, but most don't.
Okay.
We make an ordinance.
Yeah.
Can we do that, or does that have to be planning and zoning?
You could recommend it, and I would funnel that through refuse and public services, because I don't want to have my head cut off by the businesses downtown when we force them to actually clean the sidewalk. Bob may have some more comments on it than I do.
I want to say some of them do clean their sidewalks. I go by early in the morning, and I got to give like Dave's and a few of the other ones. They're out there with the hoses and the brooms. I understand your point, Judy. And
I mean, there's a big difference between walking down Lake Worth and walking down Atlantic Avenue.
Right. And it is unfortunate. What are you going to do? But like William said, it's been an ongoing battle. I've been here almost 30 years. It is an ongoing battle with downtown.
Thank you.
Good
Thank-
property owners, right?
Thank you. Any other board member comments? Good comments? If not, I think we're ready for adjournment. Are we ready?
Yeah.
So moved. We're adjourned.
Thank you for
Have a great
participating
evening.
in our first sort of combined live quorum meeting. I think it went really well. And I want to shout out to
Like this-
Pamela and
Kind
Aaron
of bulletproof.
and the staff.
Everybody have a happy Thanksgiving.
Everybody, yes, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thanksgiving.
All right. All right. It did go well.
Thank you, Alfonso.
Thank you.